What is up, all you individuals out there? It's me, full-time anime man, and I am finally here with the final chapter of What If Deku Had a Shadow Wolf. Now, I know it has been 100+ days. Reason why it took so long is because I really wanted this last chapter to be very special. So I will be adding in some images to help you all with your imagination of what is going on in the story. Hope you all enjoy the visuals, and I really like to thank my team for helping me put this together and for the animatic that will be in the video. Without any further spoilers, let's go ahead and get into this video. This is What If Deku Had a Shadow Wolf, final chapter. Hope you all enjoy. Where we last left off, Koe-san, Tomura, and Jigoku were fighting to get Eri back, but in the process, Jigoku died when Overhaul used Koe-san's weapon against her. However, Eri managed to bring Jigoku back from the dead with her rewind ability. Just when they were about to get away, the law had caught up to them, and in the end, Koe-san sacrificed herself so that the rest of her team can escape. A TV shows Koe-san's mugshot and the news reporter stating one of the phantom thieves has been caught, and there may be 2 or 3 more of them. Will they strike again to free their companion? What are they planning, and where are the rest of them now? We cut to Koe-san in her cell caressing her belly and talking to it. It's gonna be okay. We're gonna be fine. You know, I'm not entirely sure what your daddy is up to, but he's probably trying to find a way to get me out of here. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. They know everything about me. Jigoku, even Tomura. Sadly, your daddy has lost his powers because of an overbearing father that thinks everything is a bad influence on his children. But I promise you that if you arrive before Ragnarok, I'll raise you the right way. You'll have everything you need, and I'll make sure that you have your fair share of reading and playtime too. You'll have everything. Tears start to engulf her eyes as she fears that once her baby is born, they're going to take her away. Would they even let me say goodbye? Wiping her tears away, she says, no matter what happens, no matter what they do with you, I just need you to know that Mommy loves you so much. And I'm sorry. Her cell door opens and Koe-san was taken to an interrogation room with a man and a woman. Alright, Doc, so tell me the situation with me and my baby. Well, it seems here that your baby is fine at the moment. You're lucky that it didn't die when All Might punched you. I know. Anyway, you have many cases on your name, such as captivity, destruction of property, theft, and first-degree murder. Yeah, I confess to all of that, and I'm ready to face the consequences, full responsibility. And well, as much as we do appreciate your confession and everything, your friends are still a threat. They need to be brought in for questioning, so can you please tell us where you put them? Koe-san says, that's the oldest trick in the book. You're not fooling me. I'm not telling you. You could put me in jail and just, throw away the key. You can give me the death penalty, but at least let me give birth to my baby first. They're innocent in all of this. I'm the one who ripped my father's throat out and killed him. They, however, were just following orders of a mad man who wants to, quote-unquote, preserve life on Earth. His name is All For One, who used us and the prophecies of Ragnarok to make his dream happen to save the Earth from us. Speaking of All For One, have you found the hideout that I told you about? We have, but sadly when we arrived, it was evacuated. Damn it, he's always one step ahead. And so, for a while, they would ask questions, but whenever they would bring up Jigoku, Tomura, or Eri, she would just brush it aside and talk about something else. And the people who questioned Koe-san left the room, and Aizawa and All Might entered the room. So, Koe-san, how are you and the little one doing? Says Aizawa. Well, we could be doing better, but at least the people here have been more nicer to us. All Might said, you shouldn't have gotten into that fight while you were pregnant. Do you have any idea how reckless and stupid that was? Yeah, I'm told I can be very stubborn and hard-headed, which is one of the things that I love about myself, to be honest with you. Okay, enough small talk. Where is All for One? I don't know. If he's not at the bunker, then he could literally be anywhere. She looks to All Might and says, you can't beat him, All Might. I've made him immortal, so he can't die. What? But how? Asked All Might. How did you make him immortal? It's magic, but not just any magic. It's Odin's magic. When I found him, he taught me a few things. How to heal, how to control a storm, and how to make one immortal. He demanded me to do it. He was going to snap a little girl's neck, and if I didn't do it, that little girl wouldn't be here. So I gave him what he wanted to save her. Aizawa says, but surely what can be given can be taken away, right? I can take his immortality away, but I need him to be closer to me. But he's too powerful, and my power is too weak to fight at the moment. He took the powers of the moon, and he's going to destroy it. And then Fenrir is going to destroy his own son to destroy the sun. And once that happens, it'll be the beginning of the end. They would ask Koe-san, how do they stop it from happening? And she would tell them that they need to find Tokoyami and get his help in all of this. Help him get the moon powers back to Mani. She also tells them to find Skull and Hati and make sure Fenrir doesn't kill any of them. They get up and they leave the room, and Koe-san yells good luck to them, for they will need it. A few days would pass, and Koe-san would be laying in bed. It was dark, and the stars were twinkling in the sky when suddenly she heard a voice in her head. It was Hati. Hati, is that you? Where are you? Koe-san, listen to me. In a matter of a few days, All for One will destroy the moon powers, but he needs all of it. And I know you have that small remnants of its left. And also, my father will destroy Skull to destroy the sun. However, it won't happen as long as Tomura is still alive. You need to take Tomura and run, because my father and my brother are looking for you and him. You two just need to run away, and don't look back. No, Hati, I can save you. I can save him too. We can do this together. No, Koe-san. It's too dangerous. I can't even take my father in a fight. Koe-san, please, just run away and live for me. I love you so much. Hati, please! Suddenly, their conversation was cut short when Hati stopped talking to her. Tears start to run down her face. No, I'm gonna save you. And then I'll save the world. I just need to get out of here and find my gang. A few days would pass, and Koe-san was being escorted by security to take her to her trial. But before things could get started, Koe-san would ask if she could be taken to a bathroom. She would be taken to a bathroom, but she would have to be watched. 2 security guards watched, but in the blink of an eye, Koe-san breaks her cuffs and she would attack the guards, but not before using something to barricade the door. She then jumps all over the place, doing flips and kicks. She sees one of them were about to open fire on her, but she would grab the gun and force the guard to shoot the lights, shrouding them in darkness. Koe-san would knock both of them out, and she would quickly use the darkness to get to the abyss and form a portal outside, landing in front of a group of people who recognized her. She quickly gets up and she runs off. While running, she hears the tracking device in her leg activate as it starts beeping and blinking with light. That indicates that they were tracking her. She then enters a hardware store and she would find a box knife. She would then take the box knife to the bathroom and she would take a few deep breaths before plunging the sharp blade into her leg as she would cut around the tracking device. Large amounts of blood would expel from her cut wound, but in the end she was successful in cutting the device from her leg. The police enter the hardware store and they follow the tracking device. They opened the bathroom door and all they saw was blood on the ground and the tracking device on the ground as well. Koe-san would run down the street holding onto her wound, feeling tired from the blood loss. After a minute of running, she runs into an abandoned building and she would make a fire, getting a metal rod. She would then heat up the rod and she would cauterize her wound, sealing it, stopping the bleeding. She screams in agony, but now she managed to stop the bleeding completely. Koe-san manages to give herself a few hours of sleep before waking up in the middle of the night. Patrol cars were everywhere in search of her, but she swallowed her saliva and sneaks past the cars and pro-heroes. Soon, Koe-san reaches the place where she teleported her group. However, when she arrived there, they were already gone. She looks around, thinking that she might find a clue on where they might be. But at the end, all she could find was a piece of paper with a drawing on it that looked like it was done by a child. She looks closer and she realized that this is Erie's drawing. It was the drawing of a house, and it was with that she ran back home. But when she arrived, police and pro-heroes were everywhere, and rain began to pour on top of them, and Koe-san thinks, how is she going to get inside? Looking around, she sees an opening and she goes for it. While no one was looking, she gets inside the house, but there were police officers inside as well. She tries to think where they could possibly be, considering the fact that she didn't see them outside or in any police cruisers. They must still be inside. She then thinks for a moment, and she remembers the hiding spot that they used to play in when they were young. She makes her way to the attic and moves a few things aside before finding the door. She opens it, and inside she finds them cowering in the corner. Tomura says, Koe-san? Koe-san says, hey guys! They get up, and they all hug her, and Tomura asks why she pushed them away. But Koe-san says that she couldn't risk them being caught. Plus, that tracking device made her a detriment to the team, and they couldn't risk being found or harmed. Jigoku says, don't ever do that again. We're a team. We do this together. She agrees, and she goes on to tell them about the situation, that All For One is hunting them, and that he needs all powers of the sun and moon to be destroyed if he wants Ragnarok to happen. Tomura says that they should just run away, but Koe-san says no, we shouldn't run, because we'll be doing it for the rest of our lives, and that they need to take this fight to them instead. Jigoku says, but Koe-san, what if we fail? Well, we're doomed if we do, we're doomed if we don't. We have to fight and stop All For One, at least just try. They all agree, and Koe-san suggests that they leave, using Sleipnir, but she has to grab a few things from her bedroom. She then sneaks downstairs and finds her blueprints for her cookery knives that Tomura had given to her. She also decided to grab her mother's bones and her hero suit that her friends made for her. She returns to the group, and together they snuck downstairs and outside and made their way to Slipnir. One of the heroes spotted them and as they raised the alarms, but before they could actually catch them, Slipnir takes off to the skies with tremendous speed, and soon they arrive at Korigiri's bar. They ask him if All For One came around here, to which he tells them that he has, but it was a while ago. He tends to them, and Koe-san finds a place to forge her weapons. She melts her mother's bones down into gripping handles for the end of the blade, forming her cookery blades, and she tests them. Koe-san shows them the blades, even putting on the outfit that their classmates made for them. She would sit everyone down and tell them something that's been on her mind. She goes on to tell them that All For One had put a piece of himself inside of her head. She also tells them that he was trying to do it to Tomura when he was on his deathbed when they were younger. It was a lot for them to take in, but they accepted her either way. However, they were concerned with All For One being inside of her. Could it be possible that he's tracking them? Koe-san said if that's true, then he would have found them by now, or even broken her out of prison while she was in captivity. After their conversation, Korigiri would take Koe-san aside and would talk to her about her pregnancy situation. Aren't you scared that you might end up getting hurt? And what about your baby? Koe-san says, I am afraid that something might happen out there. But if we can stop All For One from starting Ragnarok, it's a sacrifice I don't want to make, but I will, as long as the world's safe. Uncle Korigiri, I started all of this, and I need to stop it. Very well then. I can't stop you, but please, be careful. I will. She hugs him. Thanks. Thank you for everything. A few days would pass, and suddenly the news broadcast would turn on with an urgent message, only it was All For One on TV, telling the people of not just Japan, but the entire world that Ragnarok will soon be upon them. We humans have done many damage to Mother Earth, and to the place that we've called home. And what have we done to repay? We pollute, we destroy, and we kill its creatures. Our planet is dying. We all have nothing to show for it. Well, except for me. I have tried to reason with you all, to tell you, but you all chose to live in bliss and ignorance. Ignore reality. But soon, it won't matter, because I, All For One, are going to release the war that will end all living things on Earth, and give it a new one. Ragnarok is coming, and there will be no stopping it. I am leaving you this message not just to warn you of your inevitable demise, but to give you a meaning to cherish the times that you have left with your loved ones. May whatever almighty being that you believe in bless you, and cheers to the new beginning. Goodbye. Everyone who was watching was in shock. Wait, what does he mean by the end of the world? But the Phantom Menaces, their hearts were filled with hatred. But Koe-san noticed something while the news was broadcasting. She noticed that All For One was standing at the roof of Yatsubashi's tower, and just in the back she could see the container that had her powers. And just in the corner of the screen, which could barely be made out, she saw what looked like a giant leg. Could that have been Fenrir? It was hard to tell. You guys, it's time. If we're going to do this, we need to do it today. Uncle Korigiri, I hope it's not too much to ask, but don't worry. I'll watch the little girl. You all go stop All for One. Koe-san says, you're the best. You guys ready? The rest of the team say yes. They get in their suits and equip their weapons, and they walk out the door. But Koe-san was grabbed by her leg. It was Eri. She gets down onto her knees and says, it's gonna be okay, Eri. We'll be back before you know it, I promise. She hugs her, and the three head their way to Yatsubashi's tower. Koe-san calls the heroes and tells them about All for One and where he is. She warns them to get the heroes ready and set, because if they fail, it's the end of the world. While on the train, nervousness takes the Phantom Menaces, but Jigoku takes Tomura and Koe-san by the hand and says, we can do this, you guys. We got each other. That's all there is. That's all it takes to win this. They smile, and they arrive at the street of Yatsubashi's tower. Just a few blocks, they start to walk when suddenly they were intervened by the Norse gods, but Tokoyami wasn't there with them. Koe-san would ask where Tokoyami is, but Horinir says, we know that you and him are in cahoots. How dare you tell him that I was the one that killed Odin? Because it was you and Vali. He was there when you threw Odin's spear into his chest. I saw it clear as day. And you never even answered my question. Why did you do it? Horinir says, do not listen to them, my brothers and sister. Both of them were working together this whole time. And it's time that we end this once and for all. They all get in a fighting stance, but Tomura tries one more time to reason with them, saying that the powers of the moon is just on top of that tower. Would you really want to fight us when your goal is just in arm's reach? Horinir says, it's probably a trick. Don't listen to them. We're ending this today. They do a western standoff, and then they charge at each other, and their battle begins. After a minute, it intensifies. Jigoku would use her fire and ice against Vali and Horinir. Tomura would use his melee weapons and guns against Modi and his beheaded brother at his waist. And the bullets actually managed to do some damage on them. And Koe-san would use her shadow abilities to create weapons, but immediately put them away once she has hit her target, even using her kukri knives at one point. Soul and Endred would use their powers, but Koe-san would be very lucky to not get hit. However, at one point, Koe-san was burned by Soul's fire, and Koe-san will retaliate by conjuring a shadow spear, which caused Soul to fly off of Endred's back and pin her into a wall. Endred sought out retribution, and he charges at Koe-san, but he was taken out when Koe-san used her shadow manipulation, causing him to trip over and land on a shadow dagger, which Koe-san planted on the ground, stabbing him in his stomach. A few minutes would pass, and Koe-san was helping her comrades fight. Koe-san would stop Magni and Modi, but she had trouble against Vali and Horinir. But together, the three manages to beat them into submission. But Koe-san notices that Vidar wasn't there as well. Guys, there's only 6 of them. Where's the other one? Where's Vithard? Suddenly, Jigoku and Tomura were struck by a blunt object. Koe-san turns around with a loud gasp. It was Vithard. He was ready to strike Koe-san, his weapon raised over his head. But just when he brings it down, Koe-san covers her head with her arms, prepared for the impact to come. But it never came. When Koe-san looked, she saw a dark shadow protecting her from Vithar's attack. And Tokoyami, who ran in, he was beaten, but determined. Dark shadow would push Vidar away. And Tokoyami yelled, "Stay away from my sister!" He then grabbed her by her left wrist, and he would reveal Thor's hammer symbol just on her forearm, showing it to the rest of the gods. "Look at this, all of you." Modi says, She has the symbol of Father's hammer?" Tokoyami says, "Why do you think Odin gave this to her in the first place? It's because he trusted her. He knew that she can save the world from Ragnarok, but he let her have this as a last resort." Tokoyami then turns to Hodenir and Vali and says, "Tell them right now that you two still think I'm being deceitful." They all stare at Hodenir and Vali, and they feel cornered, and Hodenir breaks, saying, "Very well then, I killed Odin." Everyone would ask him, "Why?" And he answers, "Because he took everything from me. He wanted us to live amongst these mortals for thousands of years in Midgard. We were more, we were powerful, and he took that all away from us. And for what? A prophecy that he took too far? And that he felt bad? For some wolves? How pathetic." Koe-san then turns to Vali and says, "But wait, Vali, why would you let this man kill your father?" He grunts and says, "It's because Odin's not my father. My father is Loki." Everyone gasps in bewilderment, and Vali explains that Odin took everything from him. "He took my family. He forced me to kill my own brother Narfi, and used his entrails as ropes as to tie my father in Helheim. And so I fight. I fight because I want to, and I wanted Odin dead for the longest time, and Hodenir promised he can make that happen. And when I saw him plunge that spear into Odin's chest, my heart was set free. But in the end, it didn't change a goddamn thing." Endjord says, "But why lie to us? What do you have planned?" Hodenir says, "Isn't it obvious? I want Ragnarok to happen so that we can start over again and be the gods that we were meant to be all those years ago." The gods stood alongside Koe-san, Tomura, and Jigoku, who retreat to their feet. The rest of the gods would shame the two, stating that Odin's traditions weren't perfect, but it was theirs that they stood together. They then began to list the things that happened to them because of their lies, that Magni lost his body and it's just a head, that Endjord lost his hand, and that Soul is just half a body, and it's their fault because of their lies. They believed in Hodenir, and now they can't even look at him the same. Or even Vali for that matter, now that they know who he truly is. The son of a trickster. The gods then turn to Koe-san and the gang, and Tokoyami says, "You go and take care of business up there. We'll take care of these two." They nod their heads, and the Phantom Menaces run off. When they get close to the building, the police and an army of pro-heroes were catching up to them just behind them. And then, from the tower of Yatsubashi, an army of henchmen of All for One exited the building, charging at the Phantom Menaces, with a bandaged Muscular leading the charge. As they get closer to each other, Koe-san points at Muscular, telling him to sit, and out of fear, he does. Their battle with the villains began, and the gang would fight together alongside the heroes. The Phantom Menaces would fight their way through the army of villains, and they would enter the building. And making their way up the stairway. After a few minutes, they arrive at the 20th floor, and they had to leave the stairway in order to get to the opposite side of the building to get to the other stairway that would take them to the 40th floor, when suddenly they were stopped, for Dobby was in their path. Surrounding them were a bunch of empty desks with computer monitors on them. Jigoku steps forward, saying, "Toya, what are you doing?" "That's not my name anymore. That died a long time ago." "But why are you helping All for One? You know that if he makes Ragnarok happen, it'll be the end of the world." "Don't care. What's the world ever done for me? Nothing. Every day people die. What does it matter if all life dies?" But that's besides the point. You three are not getting past me. Especially that bitch right there, pointing a finger at Koi-san. She grunts, but Tomura steps forward and says, "Hey, you don't talk to her like that." "You two, go ahead. I'll take care of him." The girls whisper, "Tomura, no, he's got cremation." "Yeah, and you don't exactly have your powers. How are you going to beat him?" Relax. I got this. I've learned a thing or two with my time with Skull. Just trust me. You guys go and stop All for One." Koe-san and Jigoku then hug him and say, "Please don't die." Tomura steps forward, and in the blink of an eye, he takes out his gun and he shoots Dobby in the shoulder with his last bullet, and he charges at him, tackling him over a few desks. When he got him on the ground, he quickly yelled for the girls to run. The girls then run off, and Tomura would bash at Dobby's face over and over again, but at one point, Dobby then touched Tomura on his shoulder, severely burning him, which hurt Skull. From down below, at Raspucci Beach, the three wolves waited for All for One's signal, and suddenly, Skull feels a burning sensation on his shoulder. Ow! "What's the matter, my son?" It's nothing, father. It's just the wind." As Dobby and Tomura's fight goes on, Koe-san and Jigoku runs up to the 40th floor, but when they arrived, they had to run over to the opposite side in order to reach the door that would take them to the roof. But they had an opposition in their way. And it was an army of Nomus, who had their sights fully set on them. The two see the stairway entrance in the distance. Jigoku knows that these Nomus are stupid. Chances are they will follow them if they both win at the same time. And so Jigoku takes a deep sigh, and she whispers to Koe-san that she's going to distract all these Nomus while she goes up and stops All for One. "But what about you?" says Koe-san. "I'm going to stay here and take on all these monsters. You need to go. Stop Ragnarok from happening before it's too late." Koe-san hugs Jigoku from behind and says, "Please be careful." "I will. Now get ready." She gets ready, and slowly the Nomus start approaching them, and in the blink of an eye, ice shrouded the room, freezing most of the Nomus, but some of them were still on the loose. And Jigoku would take the Nomus head on, giving Koe-san the chance to run for the door, making it to the rooftop. And the first thing that she sees is the machine with her powers, and All for One standing right in front of it with his back turned on her. All for One, without even turning around and looking at Koe-san, says, "It's about time that you showed up. You know, after I heard about what you did to your mother, I knew that you had the fragments of the moon powers. And you had just brought me the last piece that I need for Ragnarok to happen. I take it that Tomura is downstairs with Toya Todoroki. It's only a matter of time." Koe-san slowly takes a few steps and gets closer. Taking a deep breath, she says, "Daddy, please don't do this. We could find a better way to save the Earth. It doesn't have to be this way. All for One says, "It's far too late, Koe-san. I have come this far, and nobody is going to stop me." Koe-san steps closer and says, "It's never too late. Whatever bad things happen, it can be undone. We could just leave this place, hide somewhere else. Together, we can reform the earth, make it better the way that it should be. But this isn't the way. With more time, we can rebuild the world. With you, me, Tomura, and Jigoku, we could help the people. We could help them change." Koe-san is now in arm's reach of All for One. As they look into each other's eyes, Koe-san saw a different man who thinks he has nothing to lose, while All for One looks into her eyes and sees tears flooding them. When he sees her like that, the memories of a frightened little girl flashes through his mind, and his face shows signs of sympathy. He slowly raises a hand towards her to comfort her, but when he did that, an unwanted memory ensued inside of Koe-san's head when she was raped by Toga, who disguised herself as All for One. And with that, Koe-san jumps back out of fright, and in doing so, All for One, with anger, lunges at Koe-san and grabs her by the throat with one hand and lifts her up. "You know, it's funny. You actually almost convinced me. You know, your words carry some wisdom. But you never were able to speak when I first found you. I gave you your ability to speak. I think it's about time that I take it all back." With one hand, he reaches behind Koe-san's neck and he reverses the technique that he did on her all those years ago. And the last words that Koe-san would say was, "No! No!" as her voice fades into an eerie silence. And she tries to say something, but words won't come out. All for One would take her to the extraction machine to take out the rest of the moon powers, but before he could, his ears were filled with a voice. "Have no fear, for I am here." All Might then swoops in, punching All for One away, causing him to tumble over, almost falling off the roof. But he catches Koe-san in his arms. "Are you all right, young Midoriya?" Forgive me if I call you by your real name. Koe-san would try to say something, but she can't. Holding her hands up to her neck, she gestures to All Might that she can't speak. All Might says, "I see. You can't talk. Well, it's going to be okay, because I am here. You do what you need to stop that machine. I'll take care of All for One." Koe-san runs over to the machine that contained her powers, and she tries to reverse its mechanisms or even open it to get her powers back. Back at the 20th floor, Tomura was having trouble keeping up with Dabi. And even though Tomura had fighting skills that Dabi could only imagine, Dabi did have fire at the end of his fingertips. And he would throw fire at him, making him dodge his attacks, and he would hide behind a desk using it as a shield. Dabi says, "It looks like the tables have turned. The time has come for the living to fall. And don't you worry about Shoto or that wolf bitch. I'll make sure that they both burn in hell with you." He then does a barrage of fire attacks, and even at one point he does a complete focus fire attack on the desk that Tomura is hiding behind. But the desk can only hold back the flames for so long. Tomura says, "Skull, I know you can hear me. And I know that your father needs to sacrifice you for Ragnarok, but I know you're not ready for that yet. If I die, so do you. You must give me back my powers so I can survive." Over at Dagobah Beach, Skull looks down at his sister, having second thoughts about everything that is happening right now. Hati was bloody and beaten by Fenrir. Fenrir stood nearby, waiting for the signal. "Brother, please," said Hati. Back at the tower, Jigoku was having trouble with the Nomus, and at one point, each of her limbs were grabbed by the Nomus as they were all ready to tear her apart. She screamed loudly. Even using her fire and ice didn't help her. Both of them were out of time, and back at Tomura's fight, the desk was just about ready to give in. In a last-ditch effort to get his powers back, Tomura then stuck his hand out into the flames as his hand got severely burned. Skull felt the intense heat, and as he jolted with pain. "What is wrong, my son?" "It's nothing, father. It's just I stepped on something." With a wink of his eye, it shines, and it gives Tomura his powers back. Tomura felt it. That roaring fire that burns within him. He knew that the powers of the sun was back in his body, and he was going to use it against Dabi. He called out his name. "Dabi, wait!" "All right. Victory is yours. I'm willing to die right now, but only if you let me die on my 2 feet and allow me to face you." Dabi chuckles a few times, and then says, "All right, fine. Have it your way." He steps out, and the two stare each other down. And this, my individuals, is where the special animatic comes in. I hope you all enjoy. Tomura stops, and he sees Dabi barely breathing, his skin burned all over in horrible degree that could not be measured. Tomura approaches him, grabs him by his hair, or what's left of it, as he raises him up to his face. "I have won. You have lost. Stop this right now, or I'll finish it." Dabi grunts, and just when he's about to use his powers, Tomura then sent a plasma beam attack through his fingertip and into Dabi's head, killing him instantly. He runs up to the 40th floor and sees dead Nomus all around, with fire and ice engulfing the room. And in the center of it, he sees Jigoku. He approaches her. "New power-up?" "Yeah. Just, don't touch my fire or it'll freeze you, and don't touch my ice or it'll burn you." They run up to the roof, and they see Koi-san trying to disable the machine. They try to talk to her, but they realize that she can't. And this is where Tomura notices that she can't talk because All For One took her voice. They look over as they hear a loud crashing sound nearby. It was All For One and All Might fighting. They both stop to catch their breath, but All For One sees the Phantom Menaces together, and he sees Tomura, and this is where an idea comes to his mind. And he tells All Might that Tomura Shigaraki is the grandson of Nana Shimura. All Might then looks at him with bewilderment, like there's no way that it could be true. While he was distracted, All For One then charged in, ready to attack, but just before his attack could connect, something happens. Suddenly, both All Might and All For One started spitting out blood. Bruises start appearing on their bodies, and it is at that moment Koi-san realizes what's going on. What happened 14 years ago when their battle almost ended their lives, that time has finally caught up to them. All Might on the ground. Both of them fall to the ground in horrible pain as their fatal scars start to appear on their bodies, with All Might and basically the bottom left half of his stomach exploding, and All for One, with his eyeballs being knocked out of their sockets. By the time it had finished, both of the men were covered in blood and bruises. It was a horrible sight, though even the Phantom Menaces were bewildered by what they had just witnessed. But they had to regain their focus on the machine. It was almost time for the powers to be destroyed. And so, Jigoku and Tomura opened fire on the machine to hopefully get it to overheat and shut down, or just stop it in any way that they could. But Koe-san notices that with the extreme heat, it's causing the process to accelerate faster. So she gets them to stop, and she gets another idea. And she has Tomura use his saber arm to melt the locking mechanism on the seal of the containment unit, so that way she can get inside and get her powers back. He does this, igniting his saber arm. He then focuses it on the locking mechanism, but it causes a very bright light to ensue, so blinding that they had to divert their vision away from it so that they don't go blind. It was kind of like a welding process. Extreme heat on metal to melt it together. However, down below, the wolves also saw it. Fenrir stares in bewilderment. Wait a minute. That's not the signal that he told me about. What is that? Look, squinting his eyes, he sees that it's Tomura, Jigoku, and Koe-san trying to get the moon powers back. Fenrir looks at Skull with anger. You gave him his powers back? Skull backs up in fear out of his father. I'm sorry, father. It's just, he was in danger and I wasn't ready to die before the moon powers could be destroyed. Fenrir grunts and he says, wait here, I'm going to finish this. Hati tries to stand up and says, no, father, leave them alone. Hati, be quiet. I'll deal with you later. No! Hati then got up and she lunged at her father, planting her teeth into his neck. You dare attack your father? How dare you? I shall kill you for your betrayal, Hati. Fenrir tries to get her off. Skull would step in and he would pull Hati off of their father, throwing her to the ground. Fenrir would then attack his own daughter, grabbing her by her stomach and just throwing her around. Her cries echo through the air, and this is where Koe-san could hear that she is in trouble. She looks, and she sees her at the beach. Her own family attacking her. Fear starts to engulf her body, and she wants to do something, and this is where she sees a ballista. It was loaded with a giant spear ready to fire. She quickly had Jigoku help her angle the machine, and just when they have it angled at Fenrir, she pulls this lever, and this giant spear flies. And as it gets closer, Skull and Hati could see it coming, and Skull pushes Fenrir out of the way before it could pierce him as it plants itself into the sand. Fenrir grunts, but then Skull says, don't worry, father. I got this. My own puppet is up there. Both of his eyes glow an orangey hue, and we go back up to the top of Yatsubashi's tower. Koe-san and Jigoku notices that they've missed, but there was no other ballistas around for them to use, and there was no more ammunition nearby. So Koe-san gets an idea. She remembers the sword that she took from Fenrir the first time that she met him, and she uses her powers to open a portal just above them, and that very sword fell through. Jigoku and Koe-san loaded the ballista with the sword. They then pulled the string back as it was ready to fire again, but just when they were about to pull the lever again, Tomura says, you guys, there's something wrong, as he looks at his own hand. What is it? Asked Jigoku. Suddenly, Tomura turns around and he swings his saber arm at Jigoku, who barely dodged, but it did leave a minor scratch on her chest. What the hell, Tomura? I can't control myself! He lunges at Jigoku and tries to slash at her, but she dodges. Koe-san jumps in trying to stop the conflict, but then Tomura tries to slash at her, and he manages to cut her in the arm. She couldn't scream. All she could do was just hold on to her bleeding arm as she felt the intense heat building up around her scar wound. Koe-san, I'm so sorry! The saber arm then fades away, but then Tomura was engulfed in flames and he throws flames attack at the two girls. This goes on for a minute until Jigoku decides to fight back, throwing a barrage of ice attacks at Tomura, but he would always counterattack with his fire abilities. Jigoku would then shroud Tomura's body in ice, and it seems to have done the trick, but then Tomura bursted out of the ice, lunging at the girls and grabbing them by their necks, holding them up. I'm sorry, girls. I swear, I'm not doing this on my own. Tomura thinks for a second and tells Jigoku to stab him. She was a bit hesitant, but she did end up conjuring an ice dagger and stabbing him in the side of his stomach. And out of pain, he dropped them. And they hear Skull's screams in pain as well. Jigoku then puts two and two together and she figures out that Skull is controlling him. She tells him that he needs to get as far away as possible. He tries to, but Skull takes control again, only for him to charge up and attack, and he would force Tomura to jump into the air with both of his fists engulfed in flames, and he would punch the ground with tremendous force, causing a shockwave that would throw both of the girls back. Jigoku would hit a wall, which knocked her unconscious, and Koe-san would be dangling off the side of the building. She breathes heavily and she tries to pull herself back up, but then Tomura comes to her and he grabs her by her neck, lifting her up, dangling her off the edge of the building, ready to drop her. Koe-san, I can't stop. Koe-san starts to panic, but then she gets an idea, and she would use her shadow kinesis to telekinetically move her and Tomura to the center of the building, so that way she cannot fall off the roof. Just as they were about to get up, suddenly All For One started grunting and moving, trying to get up himself, but it was very slow at the moment. While Koe-san was distracted, Tomura got on top of her, and he would start choking her with both hands. Koe-san tries to free herself, but Tomura was too strong for her. Tomura says, Koe-san, you have to finish me before it's too late. Koe-san couldn't bring herself to do that because not only does she care about him too much, but also Ragnarok would happen. It would bring the Earth closer to its imminent demise. But then Koe-san gets an idea. She remembers that Tomura has a sort of thermal sight where whatever he touches, he could see through that thing that he's trying to look through. And so, with both of her hands, he then grabs Tomura by one of his hands, and she would forcibly put his hand down over her stomach. Why are you? Tomura stops in mid-sentence. When his hand lays on Koe-san's stomach, he was able to see a second heat signature inside of her. And inside he could see a 4-month-old baby. You're pregnant? As tears start to usher down Koe-san's face, she then points at her stomach and then at Tomura, signaling that he's the father. Unknowingly, Tomura lets go of Koe-san, and at the same time, Skull, who can see everything that Tomura sees, he is stunned of what he just saw and heard. And as with that, he stood there in disbelief. With the times that he spent with the Phantom Menaces, he has grown a bond with them. And now, seeing that he did this while one of them is pregnant, it wounded his pride as a man. No, there was never no pride. Deep down, he really did care for the humans. He even loved them like family. How could I have been so blind? Skull asked himself. Who was... He then turned to his father, who was mauling his sister, and suddenly, Fenrir was then struck by a beam attack that caused him to fly back, and he sees his own son attacking him. I can't let you go any further, father. Then die, said Fenrir. Fenrir then lunges at the two, but then Skull would unleash his power on his own father. He would wallow around in pain as he continued to use this light focus beam attack on Fenrir. Hati stares off in bewilderment that her brother is fighting for her, fighting for their home. Back at Tomura, he stares down at his hands in shock that he was not only choking Koi-san, but he was also choking his unborn child. Suddenly, he felt Koi-san's hand on his face. He knew she was trying to comfort him, but even when in control, he felt like that option could be taken away from him at any second. At that moment, he didn't trust Skull. And so, he quickly ushers towards the stairs, and he jumps into that open space of the stairway and fell 20 flights of stairs down, hitting the ground with tremendous force. Koi-san quickly ushers after him, going down the stairs. She reaches him. All of his bones and his organs were smashed. Blood was everywhere. Koi-san held him, wanting to ask him if he's okay or still alive, but she couldn't. Tomura opens his eyes, and he looks to Koi-san and says, I'm gonna be a dad. She nods her head, yes. Oh my... Oh my goodness. I am so happy to hear that. It's okay. I'm not mad you hid this from me. The important thing is that you and the baby are okay. He starts coughing up his own blood. You gotta stop all for one and make the world safer for our child. If you can't stop him, then bring him to me. I'll take care of him. Koi-san nods her head, and she was about to get up and go back upstairs, but then Tomura gripped her hand tighter. Hold on. Will you marry me? Koi-san's eyes explode with tears, and she nods her head yes, and she seals it with a kiss. Back at the beach, Skull was feeling the effects when Tomura had jumped. His bones broke and his organs felt like they were being squashed. Fenrir gets back up and he attacks Skull. Hati gets up and she attacks her father once again. Back at Koi-san, she was back at the machine with her powers. It was just barely an arm's reach of her. Just when she's about to go and try and regain her powers, All For One screams and grabs Koi-san by her neck, choking her. Koi-san looks at his face. His eyes were gone, and he barely didn't even have a face at this moment. His face was bloody and bruised with purple and black. He breathes heavily, exposing his teeth, and says, "You are not going to foil my plans! Just die!" Koi-san cries, and while doing so, she spoke with only 2 words. "Daddy, please." Even without his eyes, All For One knew that he was holding Koi-san. It bewilders him that even though he took her voice from her, She could just barely talk. Therefore, it reminds him of that little girl he picked up and showed her the light. The faint love that he had for that child resurfaced, and he lets go of her, letting her breathe. His mind kept going back to that moment. He felt proud of her, like a father, and had conflicting feelings about what he had just done to her. Koe-san coughs a few times before seeing her opportunity. All for One was in the path of the doorway. Taking her opportunity, she then grabbed him by his shirt and pushed him towards the stairway. He stumbles back a few times before meeting the stair rail and then falling over it. He then reaches the bottom and he lands next to Tomura, and just when he's about to try and finish All for One off, All for One could tell that it was Tomura just right there, and he tells him something that completely shocked him. I gave you your power. Now your family is dead. He then chuckles a few times, and then Tomura was just being overflown with emotions of anger, like it's his fault that all of this had happened to him. And he was, at that moment, Tomura was blinded by his own rage, and he creates a makeshift sun around All for One and him, but All for One, seeing what he's doing, he quickly tries to crawl away from him, but sadly the only thing that he could save at that moment was his own head, as the rest of his body and Tomura disappear from existence, as both of their bodies were burned to ashes, and those ashes turned into nothing. There was nothing left of Tomura. There was nothing left of the body, except for the head of All for One. Koe-san reaches down while trying to shout Tomura's name, but nothing came out, for all she did was hold her hands to her throat. However, down below, All for One managed to save his head from the attack. Cursed with immortality, his disembodied head lived on. Suddenly, the sun in the sky vanished, flickering in and out of existence, before shrouding the world in darkness completely. Fenrir looked to the sky, happy that his plan was now 50% done. Now for the moon. He then turns to Hati and Skull, who was comforting one another. Skull knew that his time was cut short now that Tomura was gone, but before he vanished, he then looked to his sister and apologized for all that he has done, and then vanishing out of existence completely. At first, Hati was sad that her brother was gone, but then anger slowly started to take her as adrenaline filled her body, and she lunges at her father, and the two continue their battle. And in every moment that it went on, it grew intensely. And suddenly, a thought came to Hati, that being that her father is immortal, therefore his reign of terror will never end. Therefore, she has to stop him at any cost. I think it's worth mentioning that when Koe-san was given Odin's knowledge of magic and all that, Hati gained some of that knowledge as well when they became one again. When Hati saw her opportunity, her and her father jumped at each other at the same time, both of them having their mouths open ready to bite down on one another. But when they connected, Hati managed to catch her father by his head in her mouth. And at one point, she planted her teeth so deep that she actually ended up taking one of Fenrir's eyes. Fenrir shakes his head left from right, trying to get her off, and suddenly Fenrir's body was shrouded in a blinding light. It lifts, and he manages to get his child off. "What have you done to me?" "I took away your immortality. The laws of nature has you in its clutches once again, father. Now, time to die." Fenrir then grunts, and they continue their fight. Back at Koe-san, she was still grieving for the loss of her potential husband. She gathers herself together, getting back up and walking back outside. Looking over, she sees Jigoku, who was knocked out but trying to wake back up, rushing her process of coming to. She then turns her attention back to the machine and she sees that it is just barely open. She was about to go over and try to get her powers, but suddenly she was struck. And this strike hit her so hard that she tumbled a few feet away. She looks and sees that it was Hordenir. "You," Hordenir says. He slowly approaches her. "The day of reckoning is upon you and the human race. It is the dawn of a new day." Koisan struggles to get up as she wants to know, what has he done to Tokoyami? "Oh, what's the matter?" says Hordenir. "Cat got your tongue? I'm sure you're wondering where your half-brother is. Well, that doesn't matter anymore. None of the other gods matter either. You will die soon with the others, and I will be the last one alive. And soon I will restart where Odin forced us to stop. Or maybe you could join me. You know, after watching you for a while, I've learned a lot about you, and I do love a woman that can fight. How about you be my goddess?" Koisan scoffs at his proposal and rejects him. She just stares at him with hatred in her eyes, and then her look goes to Jigoku. Hordenir thinks for a moment, and he looks over and sees Jigoku, who is slowly starting to wake up. "Okay then, I'll take the life of someone that you care about. That way we can both share the feeling together." He starts to walk towards Jigoku, and Koisan ushers at him with a shadow staff in hand. She swings it at Hordenir, but Hordenir catches it in mid-air, and he throws a punch at Koisan, but she dodges, not falling for that trick twice. She retaliates by kicking Hordenir and punching him with a barrage of punches, but Hordenir strikes back. Their battle goes on for a minute, but Hordenir is victorious when he lands a blow on Koisan's stomach, causing her to toss and turn and tumble around, nearly falling off the roof. She holds her hands up to her stomach as it hurt badly. When she regained her composure, she sees Hordenir trying to get Jigoku, but Koisan raises both of her hands in the air, creating a portal, and all of the heroes and people that she has captured over the years fall through. I'm talking about Pixie Bob, Crimson Riot, Godzilla, Rukuro Nomura, aka number 6, and Yatsubashi. They all fall through the portal, and they were about to land on top of Hordenir. But in doing so, the one side of the building collapsed due to Godzilla's weight, and the 6 other people fall down the side of the building with Hordenir, leaving the building in ruins. But at least Jigoku was safe, along with the powers and All Might. Duly note, I think it's worth mentioning that since the victims were like shrouded in their shadow armor, they were not hurt due to the fall. Let's just say that. But due to the building collapsing, it damn near knocked over the container that held her powers. It was basically just dangling on the edge of the building, like one blow of the wind, and it could just fall over. When Koisan has a second to breathe, she felt wetness between her thighs. Looking down, she saw that there was a pool of her blood on the ground. Koisan held her hands up to her face, for there may be a chance that she had suffered a miscarriage. When Hordenir punched her in the stomach, she falls to her knees, and for a moment she had lost hope in humanity, and the world around her was just slowing down. She was in disbelief. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think straight. Her first baby may be dead. The last thing that she ever had to remind her of Tomura was gone. Suddenly, she feels a hand on her shoulder. She looks and it's Jigoku. She hugs her. And Jigoku looks at the blood on the ground with Koe-san holding her stomach. And she thinks that she might have lost her baby. Jigoku manages to say, "Hold on to hope," before passing out again. While Koe-san was on the ground collecting herself, Korigiri's portal appears in front of her, and he, along with Eri, appear right in front of her. He comforts Koe-san and asks her if she is okay, to which Koe-san wipes away her tears and signals to him that she can't talk because All for One took her voice. Korigiri says there's gotta be something we can do. There's no more sun, and without it, all the plant life, it's gonna die. She thinks, and the abyss comes to her mind. It's a safe place, and it's perfect for the people of the world, and it's endless, so everyone can fit inside. Koe-san uses her hands to gesture that she needs a pen and paper to write down what she wants to say. She writes down that now that the sun is gone, it's going to plunge the world into chaos. The people need a safe place, and the only place that I could think of is the abyss. We need to find a way to open a portal to the rest of the world so that everyone can get inside. After a minute of considering their options, Koe-san knows that she can only open one portal, and not even for a couple of seconds before it shuts. Korigiri gets an idea, and he tells Koe-san that he can be her portal, and that he will open a portal to every country in the world. The only problem is that it will most likely kill him. Koe-san shakes her head, not wanting to sacrifice her uncle that she's known for a long time, but he tells her that there's no other way, and that the people of the world need her help to protect them. But before they begin, Korigiri tells Koe-san how proud he is of her, how so far that she came in life and is trying to save people now. He also tells her to keep moving forward and goodbye. Koe-san tears up, but then she wipes away her tears and opens a portal to the abyss, and Korigiri combines himself with the portal, and the next thing Koe-san and Eri heard was Korigiri's screams of agony. Eri hugs Koe-san tightly, and Korigiri says, It's okay." The portal contorts and expands outwards, and Korigiri opens a giant portal in every country of the world, from Japan to Africa, America, Canada, everywhere in the world. Korigiri would tell them that if they wish to survive, that they must come into the abyss to enter him. He spoke multiple languages in every country. The people, as hesitant as they enter the portal and into the abyss. Koe-san enters herself and finds someone to look after Eri and Jigoku, and she comes across Uraraka. "Koe-san, you're here. What's going on?" Koe-san signals to her that she can't speak, and Uraraka asks what happened to her voice, but then she was interrupted when all of her classmates of 1A came to her. Well, Bakugo not being the most excited. And they try asking her what's going on, but Uraraka tells them that she can't speak. Ida asks Koe-san if what's going on is a result of Ragnarok, to which Koe-san nods her head yes. She then took the piece of paper that she pocketed and handed it to Uraraka, asking her to keep an eye on Eri and Jigoku. She said she would, but asked why, and Koe-san writes down that she needs to go get All Might and bring him in here and get him medical attention. Exiting the abyss, she quickly runs over to All Might, who was barely alive from all the blood loss. She quickly gets him up and walks him towards the portal, but in the process of doing so, All Might falls to the ground with a loud thud. Koe-san tries over and over again to get him inside, but All Might says, "It's too late." And then he pulls a piece of hair from his head, and he raises it to Koe-san's face, saying, "Eat this." Koe-san was confused. What is this? I'm not gonna make it, young Midoriya. Just in case, there's even the slightest chance that All for One still lives, I need someone to take my power and use it to fight the evil in this world. Koe-san, holding a hand up to her face, I know that you may have worked with my nemesis, but seeing you go the extra mile to save the people of not just the city of Japan, but the world, it truly goes to show... It truly goes to show that you're a good person, and you deserve a second chance. Please, take my power. Keep One for All alive. Koe-san takes the hair, and she eats it, granting her the power of One for All. All Might says, Koe-san, be the person, no, the hero I know you can be. Protect this world. Protect the people. All Might then succumbs to his injuries and dies in her arms. Koe-san walks back into the abyss, and she lets her classmates know that All Might has died. They all were in bewilderment, and Jigoku wakes up, and she asks what's going on, and Jiro tells her that All Might has died. And she checks on Koe-san to see if she's alright, but suddenly, Koe-san feels something strange with her body. And suddenly, she is met with a strange headache. Then suddenly she hears his voice. I am not done yet. Koe-san falls to the ground, wallowing in pain, her classmates gathering around her, trying to help her. Jigoku asks, what's wrong? But Koe-san was too distracted with the pain, holding her head and holding her hands to her head and just rolling around on the ground. She hears All for One's voice again saying, Koe-san, your job is not done yet. From this point on, your body is mine. Suddenly, Koe-san's hair went from green to black, and then to white, and then black again, and then white again. Uraraka asks Jigoku what's going on with her, to which Jigoku remembers that Koe-san mentioned that All for One put a piece of himself inside of her, and she hypothesized that he's trying to take control of her. She holds her in her arms, said, listen to me, Koe-san. Don't let him take control of you. You have to fight back. He can't have you. If you're gone, then I'll be alone, and I can't lose you again. For a second, Koe-san's vision goes back and forth to reality, and she sees Jigoku with tears flooding her eyes, and she sees her classmates, and Eri, who was scared. Her mind is flooded with emotions and all of the memorable things that she has been through with all these people. They were great. They were her best friends. One of them was a lover, yes, but Jigoku and Eri, they were family. She couldn't abandon them Inside Koi-san's mind, All for One stood behind her with a hand on her shoulder. Koi-san, it's time. Koi-san takes a deep breath and says, You're right. It is time. Turning around, she says, It's time for you to leave. Grabbing him by his shirt, she pushes him back where a white portal forms where she is pushing him. All for One fights back, and the two would engage in combat. Their fight would go on for what felt like an eternity, and at one point, All for One pins Koi-san to the ground. Koi-san continues to fight, and All for One says, You can't win, Koi-san. Why is it that you keep fighting? Koi-san looks into the eyes of her once-was father figure and says, Because a wise man once told me, when life gives you lemons, you never get down. And even if you do get down, you always gotta put yourself back up. Grabbing him by his hands, Koi-san forces them off of her neck, and in the process of doing so, something happened. Koi-san is shrouded in a colorful electricity, and All for One is bewildered. What is the meaning of this? As Koi-san continues to push back, suddenly her figure changes for a millisecond, and All for One gasps when he sees his younger brother. All for One is then flung back, and when he gets back up, he sees Koi-san and 8 figures standing behind her, each of them glowing a different sort of color. He sees Yoriichi Shigaraki, Hakaige Shinomori, Daigoro Banjo, and Nana Shimura Toshinori Yagi, and another user that doesn't have a name yet. Koi-san looks at him, more determined than ever, and in a flash, she dashes at him with tremendous speed, and she would punch him in the face, and every time he looked back, he saw a different person. First Yoriichi, then Shinomori, Banjo, An, the mysterious user, then Nana, and finally Toshinori, who delivered an uppercut. All for One lays on the ground, beaten. Koi-san then takes a deep breath, and she grabs him by his collar and drags him to the white portal. She dangles him just over it. But All for One says, Wait, Koi-san, please. We can work together. Think of all the corruption in the world that lies in the abyss. We can make them, and the plagues, and the fires that burn this earth disappear in a flash. Just you and me, together. You're like the daughter that I never had. And at the end, I don't deserve you. But you deserve the best. And I can be that best that you need. Come on. Let's do this together. Koi-san sighs with frustration and says, You still don't get it, do you? Koi-san gives him a compelling speech, saying that humans are the most intelligent species to ever lived, and that they may have brought about chaos to the earth, but they never just laid down and died, but instead the human race kept thriving, growing stronger. They kept moving forward. They kept getting smarter. And they've made mistakes, but they've also learned from them. Sure, animals may have been their food, but that's just the circle of life. But as you mentioned before, that you've lived a very long time, and I think it's time that your life cycle comes to an end. She then drops him through the portal, and she is now fully in control of her body. Back in the abyss, Koi-san slowly opens her eyes, surrounded by her friends. She sits up. Jigoku comforts her. Are you okay? She shakes her head, still a bit drowsed from what she had gone through. Looking over, she sees Eri crying and she hugs her, assuring her that everything's alright. She also looks at her hair and notices that it's black again. Jigoku asks what happened with All for One, and if he's still inside of her. To which Koe-san remembers, wait, if he tried to take control of my body, chances are that he's still alive. And she gestures to Jigoku to stay here and look after Eri, running out of the portal and back into the real world. When she did, she heard the voice of Kodagiri. Koe-san, I can't hold on much longer. Koe-san quickly ushers down the stairs, where she finds All for One's disembodied head. She then picks up the disembodied head of her once-was father figure, All for One. As they both stared into each other's eyes, Koe-san then strips him of his immortality, and he dies once and for all. Game over, Koe-san thought to herself. Koe-san then dropped the head and fell to her knees, crying for the loss of her potential husband. After she had finished, she ran back up the stairs, and she was about to go back through the portal. But she looks over and sees the container with her powers broken open. It must have happened when Godzilla nearly fell on it. She quickly ushers over to try and regain her powers, but suddenly she was struck from behind. It was Hodernir. He had her pinned to the ground. He was badly beaten, with a broken arm and a missing eye. He then grabbed her by her head, bashing her head to the ground, causing her discomfort and disorient her so that she couldn't fight back. Dragging her to the machine, he then straps her into it, and extracting the last power that she had left, leaving her weak and vulnerable. He throws her away, and he ushers the machine's process to destroy her powers once and for all. Koe-san quickly regains her composure, and she returns to her feet and lunges at Hodernir, trying to regain her powers, but with the adrenaline flowing throughout his body, he got the upper hand on her. Kodagiri watches, and he informs Jigoku that Koe-san's in trouble. And without even saying anything, she ushered out of the portal and back into the real world, where she sees Hodernir beating Koe-san. And in the blink of an eye, he then grabbed her by one of her legs and made one of her knees bend in the opposite direction. Koe-san was in so much pain that she wanted to scream, but she was unable to. All she could do was wallow on the ground as she gripped her knee that was dislocated. Jigoku then ushers in, and she would stab Hodernir from behind with an ice dagger, and she would unleash a barrage of fire attacks. Hodernir would attack back, getting close to Jigoku, punching her. While she was on the ground, Hodernir would pull out a large knife, and he would stab Jigoku in her stomach. Jigoku screams in agony, and Koe-san was watching, and suddenly she feels this strange feeling of power in the left palm of her hand, which gave her a small shock as it emitted this bright blue hue. Her knee mysteriously placed itself back in its place. She then raises her palm to the sky, and suddenly the clouds roared with thunder, and crackles of lightning sparkled through the clouds. In Asgard, Thor's hammer awakens after a long slumber. Electricity emitted from it, and it takes off to the skies and to Midgard and into Koe-san's left hand. She catches it. Lightning engulfs her body. It was so bright that Hodernir even had to shield his eyes from the light. But when the light subsided, he sees Koe-san with the power of Thor in the palm of her hands. Electricity shrouded her body and Mjolnir. Koe-san then points the hammer at him and said, with great struggle, "Get away from her!" With tremendous speed, she ushers at Hodernir with a stream of lightning behind her. She hits him in the chest, and he flies miles away, and Koe-san removes the knife from Jigoku's stomach and uses Odin's magic to heal her, but it was only enough to stop the bleeding. She then looks at Mjolnir with amazement, and suddenly it spoke to her. saying that she can do this. She just needs to focus and listen to its voice. Are you ready, Master? Koe-san smiled as she nodded her head. Where Horonir was, he saw lightning from the roof where he just was, and suddenly Koe-san appears in front of him. And she would wail on him, doing so much damage. She would whack him with the hammer. She would smack him all over the place, and wherever she would whack him, she would always jump in that direction and then hit him in another direction. This would go on for a little bit. There was even at one point where she actually threw the hammer at Horonir, and it was so heavy that he fell to the ground and he was unable to move. Koe-san would then call down a barrage of lightning attacks to strike the hammer and Horonir, causing him great pain. When Koe-san thinks that he has had enough, she stops and approaches him. Horonir begs for mercy, but Koe-san smiles and shakes her head. No. Reaching for his head, she strips him of his immortality, but then she remembers something important. Her hand then phases into Horonir as she extracts his power crystal, claiming it for herself, then stripping him of his immortality. And he dies instantly. Koe-san takes a sigh of relief as it's all over, but then she hears Korigiri's voice. Koe-san, I can't hold it any longer. Koe-san uses Thor's hammer to jump to the tower. As she lands, she realizes there's about 20 seconds left on the machine before it destroys her powers. She tries to go and reclaim her powers, but suddenly she hears Hati's wails of cries in the distance. She looks and she sees Fenrir getting the best of her, trying to rip her apart, even having his teeth on her neck. Koe-san tries to use Mjolnir, but it no longer worked. It was out of power. Looking over, she sees the javelin that she loaded up with the sword that was once in Fenrir's mouth, ready to fire. But with the time that she spent observing, there was only 5 seconds left on the machine where it will destroy her powers. Koe-san was basically in a fork in the road at the moment. Does she go get her powers back and stop the world from ending? Or does she save Hati and allow Ragnarok to happen, bringing about the end of the world? Time stops for Koe-san, as she couldn't think. This was all so fast. Does she save her best friend who was there for her ever since her second birthday, who taught her everything that she knows? Or does she save the world? Those 5 seconds then turn into 4 seconds. Koe-san then runs over, and she pulls the lever, and the javelin fires, launching the sword, and it pierces Fenrir's body, pinning him to the ground. Fenrir screams in agony. He spits out his own blood, and Hati, who was barely able to stand back up, approaches him. Fenrir rants about how disappointed he is that his own children had turned on him. He never thought that he'd see the day where he would be betrayed by his own blood. Hati retaliates, saying, "Betrayed you? Betrayed you? I loved you, father. I just wanted to live my life not having to worry about the world ending. I shouldn't have to live my life under your desires. I shouldn't live my life of what happened in your past. I just wanted my family back. I spent 5,000 years of my life living in your shadow, but ever since the moon god has set me free, I found meaning again. And you don't care if I was happy." A tear starts to fall down from her face, and Fenrir scoffs at his daughter's words and says, "You bring me much pain, Hati. Even more pain than the sword that pierces my body. Hati, if this is the last time that we speak of each other, then I want you to know that I am greatly disappointed with you. And it has been my greatest regret not killing you sooner when I had the chance." Hati then wipes away her tears and says, You're still blinded by your own selfish desires. Well, if that is how you feel, so be it. I'm done trying to reason with you. Turns out I was a real fool to think you could change. I want you to know this, that you were beaten by a mere mortal, as you like to call her. Hati then starts to walk off towards the tower, but before she takes another step, she says, "And by the way, you are no longer my father." As she walks away, the moon then disappears from the sky. Back at the tower of Yatsubashi, Koe-san cries, second-guessing her choice, whether she did the right thing or not. She followed her heart, but in the end, she ended up trapping possibly billions of people in the abyss. And now that the moon was gone, and the powers were gone with it, does that mean that they no longer exist? Did Koe-san erase them from existence? Suddenly, Koe-san feels a hand on her back, and she turns around. It's Eri. With so much excitement flowing through her body, she then hugs her, happy that she's okay. She then looks over, and she sees Korigiri, who was flickering in and out of existence. Before he disappeared permanently, Korigiri tells Koe-san that the people in the abyss are still there, and even now he can hear their voices. "Koe-san, you must find a way to open the portal to the abyss and free the people. Goodbye." He then disappears, and Koe-san mourns for the loss of her beloved uncle. But Eri is there to comfort her. Koe-san then picks up Jigoku and carries her downstairs. When she gets outside, she then is met with Hati, who runs to Koe-san, and Koe-san hugs her snout, so happy that she's okay. "Child, I'm so happy that you're okay. What's wrong? Why aren't you talking?" Koe-san then points to the back of her neck, and Hati finally gets it. "Oh, all for one took your voice." She nods her head. "Oh, child, I'm so sorry I wasn't there to protect you." Suddenly, Hati looks forward, and her snout clenches, exposing her teeth, snarling and growling. As Koe-san looks, she sees that it's the gods. All of them were beaten badly. Only 2 of them were missing: Soul and Magni. Koe-san then extends her arms out, suggesting that Hati stops, and she walks over to the group, and Tokoyami is the first to speak. "Koe-san, I'm glad you're alright. We lost Soul and Magni, but during the skirmish we did manage to reunite Vali with his family. Because Horonir turned on him too." Looking to the sky, he says, "So, the sun and the moon are gone." She hung her head down out of shame. "I see. Then it's only a matter of time before Ragnarok begins. Soon the 9 realms will come together into Midgard, and all of its monsters and creatures will reign upon Midgard, destroying everything in their path." Koe-san thinks for a second, and she approaches Tokoyami, and she presses her closed hand against his shoulder. What are you doing?" They look deeply into each other's eyes, and Tokoyami gets it. "I see. You want to fight against the creatures of Norse mythology and try to restore the world to its former glory? I'd say that you were crazy for trying that, but considering the fact that we have nothing else better to do, it's the end of the world after all, so why not?" Tokoyami looks down at Koe-san's leg and sees that it's badly damaged, but Koe-san would still want to try. Tokoyami informs everyone of what's going on, and none of them object to it. In fact, the gods want to help since it's time for a new beginning. This is what they were destined to do, for they were supposed to be the 7... Just a quick FYI, those 7 gods were supposed to be the last gods that remained after Ragnarok. Just a quick FYI. It's only right that they fix things, since they were the ones who also brought about Ragnarok. Eventually, they find a spot and they talk. Tokoyami explains that now that Soul is gone, there is no one to make a new move, and he goes on to explain that he himself can't make a new moon because, well, he doesn't have that kind of power within him. He is only a halfling. Tokoyami then looks to Koe-san and remembers that she's pregnant and asks if it's possible that the one with the black hair, referring to Tomura, could be the father of that baby's child, the one who had the powers of the sun. Koe-san nodded her head, but she also writes down that there's a chance that she might have lost the baby. Njord then approaches Koe-san, places a hand on her stomach, and reads her blood. And he tells her that her baby is just barely alive, so whatever she did before, she's going to have to take it easy from now on, otherwise she will lose it. Koe-san nearly explodes with tears after hearing her baby is still alive. Tokoyami says, "So there is hope for us yet. My mother once told me that she gave birth to me after killing my own mother, and that the only reason that I got her powers is because she artificially inseminated herself with my egg. She explained to me how the factors of that work, so since Koe-san did have the powers of the moon, and her father had the powers of the sun, there is still a chance for us yet to restore the world." Jigoku, who is awake by the way, hugs Koe-san, happy that her baby is alive as well. Anyway, they discuss a little more details on their plans, and after a while of going through them, they went off to gather supplies to survive the apocalypse. But just as they were about to leave, Koe-san then stops Modi. What is it? Reaching behind her, she then pulls out Mjolnir. His eyes widen. Father's hammer. She then hands him the hammer, and he takes it, as his fingers even tremble at the thought of even touching it. Thank you so much. What is your name, exactly? She smiled, and we skip a couple of months. The group has grown over time, and they have managed to recruit many people who refuse to enter the abyss. Luckily, some of them had strong quirks that could actually take on the creatures of Norse mythology. Even the Phantom Menace's victims that they've caught over the years joined their group. Though yes, they were angered that their lives were practically taken from them, they valued survival over ambition. I think it's worth mentioning that in those times that had passed, the group has run into some trouble. Because not only did the Norse creatures all combine into Midgard, but the power plants that were left unattended did cause a nuclear outburst. But the group was lucky enough to survive it. That's another thing that they had to deal with during Ragnarok. But one day, their fortress was under attack by the Norse creatures, for the Norse creatures have heard of a prophecy that another creature will be born and will bring about the extinction of all the Norse creatures. So they decided to stop the creature from being born before it could take them out. The girl with no name, that's what Koe-san goes by, was currently in labor, and she was at the moment pushing her baby out, surrounded by doctors, Iri, and Shoto, who also took her name back. While this was going on, the army tries to push back the enemy, only to meet their bitter doom. The Norse gods was their last resort in case things went sideways, until the baby was born. But sadly, most of them met their tragic end thanks to Searcher. Suddenly, the girl feels this strange gush of wind blowing through her hair. She wasn't sure what it was, but it was comforting. Just as the walls were falling around the girl with no name, she successfully gave birth to her child. a beautiful girl who was born shrouded by an aura of solar and lunar energy. And it is with her birth, it also gave birth to the sun and moon. And the way that it appeared was like a solar eclipse, and the sun and the moon separated from each other. All of the creatures fled due to the sun's flare. Even Searcher was blinded by its blinding gaze. Suddenly, Shoto then emerged, and she shrouded Searcher in ice, extinguishing half of his flames, but Searcher managed to escape from his icy prison. The girl with no name held her baby in her arms, crying that her baby is okay, and that her baby was beautiful. Duly note, she would have loved her regardless, even if she was disfigured. Just a quick FYI. Hati, Enjord, Modi, Pixie Bob, Eerie, Red Riot, and a small group of people survived the encounterment with the Norse creatures. Koe-san steps outside with her baby in arms and the biggest smile on her face. The sunlight hit them in the face as a new day had finally come. 4 years would pass, and Eclipsa would grow into a happy little girl. She was told that one day she would bring back humanity to the real world. She was even told about her powers, and that one day she will master the sun and moon.
Mama?
Called Eclipsa. The girl with no name then turned to her daughter.
When will you teach me to use my powers? I just can't wait!
The girl with no name had a big smile on her face, and she would use sign language to tell her daughter in due time. But for now, you need to learn about the dangers of this world and what eventually you're going to go up against when you're older.
Okay.
An older Eerie enters the room with Shoto, and Eclipsa hugs them.
Big sis! And Mama, Shoto! Welcome home! Eri, let's go play for a while!
Eerie then takes Eclipsa to the other room, and the girl with no name would have a talk with Shoto. Shoto says that things are getting a little bit better in the world, but unfortunately, we lost Godzilla and Jormungandr by the hands of Sinmara. She was using her powerful weapon. The girl with no name used sign language. Is Hati okay? To which Shoto tells her that she is, but she does tell her that it may be time for Eclipsa to hone her skills, for the world will not be at peace as long as Searcher or Sinmara are still alive. The girl with no name then looked into the living room where Eclipsa and Eerie played. Taking a deep breath, she agrees, and a few months had passed. Eclipsa has learned a small fragment of her powers, starting with shadow play, just like Koe-san did. But one day, Eclipsa asked about her father and what he was like. And this is where the girl with no name and Hati get an idea. She takes Eclipsa to Helheim, where they are greeted by Hel. Oh, hello there, Hati. Eclipsa, the girl with no name. What can I do for you? Hati speaks. Auntie Hel, we were wondering if you could revive someone for us. Oh? And who might that be? Eclipsa steps forward, speaking with a little bit of nervousness in her voice.
My papa? Tenko Shimura?
Hel chuckles. Of course, child. I can even do it without you needing to request everyone in the world to cry for him. The girl with no name and Eclipsa smiled with joy, but Hel said, I could bring him back, But sadly, I can't. Because, well, he died while he was immortal. And considering the fact that there was nothing left when his body was disintegrated, it's almost impossible. Allow me to go into a little more detail. When Tomura sacrificed his body, he entered a different dimensional plane. His body may be gone, but his spirit remains with the ones he cares about the most. He is one with the wind, and every time the wind blows, you should be able to feel him. The girl with no name feels the wind blowing through her hair, and just like before, it was comforting. Even Eclipsa felt it. It felt like love. You can feel him, right? He is here with you right now, as he always will be.
I can feel him, Mommy. He really is here. Hi, Papa!
A few years would pass. Eclipsa, now 14 years old, walking through a forest area with a bow and arrow in hand. As Eclipsa walks, the crackling of snow can be heard underneath her feet. Every breath that expelled from her mouth, smoke would appear, and the glimmering light that reflected in the snow shows off its beautiful glare. Eclipsa is hunting for Norse creatures. She listens closely, and she heard panting noises, kind of like a rhinoceros. Peering her head around a tree, she sees a frost beast feasting on a dead animal. Eclipsa draws her bow and arrow, ready to fire. She waits, and then she fires the arrow into the eye of the frost beast. It screams, and with its other eye, it sees her, and it charges at her with all of its might. She stands there, waiting, and then she raises her hand into the air and causing fire to erupt in the path of the frost beast, burning it into ashes. Eclipsa then approaches it, picks up her bow, and says,
Easy peasy. I should find a way to make fire spears. That way, it could do some serious damage.
Suddenly, she hears grunting noises from behind her and looks, and she sees a frost giant staring down at her in the midst of the trees.
Oh, hey, Jack Frost. How's it going?
The frost giant grabs its clobber, ready to swing down on Eclipsa. But then, Eclipsa throws a shadow spear into the air as high as she can. And when it comes back down, she then opens her hand and it turns into 100 shadow staffs. And with a snap of her fingers, the shadow staffs then turn into fire staffs. The fiery spears would rain on top of the frost giant, killing it instantly. She then smiled, and suddenly she hears light clapping in the distance. She then turns around and she sees her mother. "Hey, Mom! So, how did I do?" The girl with no name signs at her, saying that she did great, which made her smile. But then her mother says that there's still a lot more for her to learn, even herself. She tells her that she needs just a little bit more time. Eclipsa nods her head in agreement, and we skip 10 years into the future. In those years that had passed, Eclipsa has brought about the extinction of many Norse creatures that she deemed dangerous, such as the Draugr, which is basically the undead, dwarves, which are dark elves, the Huldra, which are beautiful women that kidnap males and own them as their slaves or sacrifices. Jotunars, which are giants. Mar demons, which basically choke people while they sleep. And even trolls, because they're malevolent, giant, and too dangerous for the human race to live. Now, there has been some creatures that Eclipsa has let live just because they weren't considered a threat, like the Norns, or this other creature that has a interesting story to it called the Phosagrim, which are water creatures that actually play the fiddle and are willing to actually teach other people how to play just as well as him. I kid you not when they say that they will teach people how to play the fiddle as well as they do if they offer them a white goat with its head turned away into a waterfall that flows northwards, or a smoked mutton stone from the neighbor's storehouse 4 Thursdays in a row. That's just crazy. Eclipsa, now being 25 years old, she was in a boat with Eerie, who was much more older. Both of them were in search of the Kraken. Eerie, who surgically had a tongue attached to her, was able to speak, saying, "All right, Eclipsa, any minute now we should be closing in on the Kraken, so be ready." Eclipsa will respond back.
Aye, aye, Captain.
The two would smile at each other, remembering the times when they would play pretend. Suddenly, the ocean floor starts a very aggressive tidal wave. They both get ready, and suddenly, a giant blue tendril emerges from the water and tries to slam on their boat. Eerie would turn the boat, just barely missing them, almost rolling their boat over. "All right, sis, let's do this." Eclipsa conjures a shadow and fire staff and throws it at the tendril. And when that happened, the Kraken completely jumped out of the water, revealing itself. It was just as the legends told of it. The Kraken was about 1,400 feet in length, and it had 8 tendrils. Its eyes were that of a golden hue, and its beak was razor sharp. Its skin shined through the mucus covering its body. Eclipsa smiles with enthusiasm.
Oh, wow. The Kraken is huge. This is gonna be awesome.
Conjuring more weapons, she throws them at the Kraken, doing little damage, but effective nonetheless. "My turn," said Eerie. Taking a few seeds from her pocket, she then throws them at the Kraken. Using her rewind quirk, she actually managed to fast forward things instead of reversing them. And the seeds that she threw were General Sherman tree seeds. And when she used her quirk, she made the seeds grow into giant trees, hitting the Kraken. Eclipsa steps in, and she would throw more spears, other attacks like lunar and solar attacks at the Kraken. The Kraken fights back, swinging his tendrils at their boat, but Eclipsa uses her powers to shield the boat.
Oh, wow. We really made him mad now. We should probably finish this right now. Okay, let's do this.
Eclipsa jumps into the air, and she would hold both of her hands out. In one hand was lunar energy, and the other hand was solar energy. Putting both of the energy attacks together, combining them, she creates Eclipse Energy Attack, blasting it at the Kraken, burning off 3 of its tendrils and piercing through its head. It didn't kill it, but it did make it really mad. And so, it starts frantically slamming its remaining tendrils around. The boat rocks violently. Eerie nearly falls off, but Eclipsa was there to catch her.
I gotcha! Oh, wow. We really made him mad now. We should probably finish this right now. Okay, let's do this.
She waves her arms around and runs towards the Kraken.
Hey, over here! I am delicious. Eat me!
The Kraken then reaches down and grabs Eclipsa by one of her legs, and it raises her over its bottom half of its body, revealing its beak. It hovers her over its beak, ready to drop her inside, but Eclipsa had a plan. As she hung upside down, she rubs her hands together. She conjures a few weapons she had already used, but she would toss them aside, saying,
Use it? No, not that yet. Oh, I got it!
rubbing her hands together again, lunar and solar energy emits from her body. And suddenly, this tiny little black and white ball appears in her fingers. Hovering it in the path of the mouth of the beast, she drops it and went down the throat and into the stomach of the kraken. The kraken stops and it coughs a few times, and suddenly its stomach starts rumbling, and the kraken lets out a deafening scream, and it drops Eclipsa into the water. Its stomach implodes on itself, and the kraken was sucked into a black hole, tearing it apart, leaving only the top half of its beak intact. Eclipsa emerges from the water, shouting in celebration.
We did it!
Soon they arrive back on shore, where Shoto and the girl with no name awaited them. Eclipsa jumps off the boat and into her mother's arms.
Hi, Mom! We did it! We defeated the Kraken, now the ocean is safe! Why are you crying?
Shoto steps forward, saying that your mother wants to say that she's proud of you, and that you're ready. But she's so scared to let you go because you're all that she has left of her father. Eclipsa hugs her mom by her head.
It'll be okay, Mom. I'll defeat Sinmara and I'll come back to you. I promise.
The mother then hugs her daughter back with pride. She would sign, saying that it's time that she pass on the final piece of knowledge to her. Eclipsa gets on one knee and says, I'm ready. And her mother places her palm on her forehead, and with it, a blinding light shrouded her body. And we transition to an icy mountain. Eclipsa climbs it, wearing fully black leather outfit that her mother made for her, complete with gloves, boots, and straps that are supposed to grip around the pressure points of the torso. And just on the center of her chest was the symbol for a solar eclipse. Nervousness filled her veins, but also the excitement of adventure and what could happen next. Eventually, she reaches the top of the mountain, and there she sees her, Sinmara. She wore a robe that waved in the wind, with snow blowing around her, her back turned on Eclipsa. It's about time you showed up, Eclipsa. I've heard many things about you. I even heard that you took down the Kraken, which is sad. I considered him my pet.
Well, he was too dangerous and destructive to live. Soon enough, the human race shall return, and, well, we can't have Norse creatures running around.
She turns around. Sinmara lets out a light giggle. Today, we'll find out about that. With one pull of her robe, she then removes it, revealing her mighty sword as it burns brightly with a brilliant flame.
You know, I gotta ask, you're an ice giantess. Why is Laivatine a fire sword?
Well, there's a reason for that. She points the sword at Eclipsa. It's supposed to be ironic. Dashing at her, she then swings her sword, but only to hit Eclipsa's afterimage, and before she knew it, Sinmara was then struck in the back of the head, which knocked her a few feet away. Quickly returning to her feet, she swings her sword, only for Eclipsa to dodge. This goes on for a while until Eclipsa decides to fight back. Summoning a shadow spear, and with one swing, she knocks the sword out of her hand as it plants itself into the ground. Eclipsa would get a few hits in as the snow around them got more and more aggressive. Getting desperate, Sinmara then falls to her knees, supposedly submitting. But she slips past Eclipsa and retrieves her sword, and the two engage in melee combat. This goes on for a few minutes, where the two do cut each other. But at one point, Sinmara does a leg sweep, knocking Eclipsa down, and she would swing her blade, knocking her spear out of her hand and into the sky. It's over, said Sinmara. Eclipsa chuckles. I don't think so. And with a snap of her fingers, The shadow spear then splits into 100 spears, 50 shadow spears, 50 sun spears. While Sinmara was looking up, Eclipsa saw her opportunity, and she kicked her in her stomach, and she equipped her shadow armor to protect her from her own attack. Sinmara uses her sword to shoot fire at the spears, but it wasn't enough, and her body was being rained down upon with spears, stabbing her body in multiple parts. Eclipsa then unequips her body armor when the rain of arrows had ended.
Wow, you're a lot tougher than you look.
Samara pants loudly and says, "I'm not done yet." Taking her sword, she then plunges it into her own torso, and she activates the flames, which engulfs her body in fire. Suddenly, she moves with this tremendous speed it was so hard for Eclipsa to keep up with her. She found herself being knocked around like a rag doll, and Sinmara cutting her body, leaving her with deep cuts and burning wounds. At one point, she even had her on the ground, and Sinmara gets on top of Eclipsa, and she raises her sword over her head, ready to stab down. With all her might, she then brings the blade down, but with one hand, Eclipsa then grabs the end of the blade. Even through the leather gloves, it cuts her hand deeply, but she did stop the sword from piercing her head. Sinmara puts all of her weight on the other end of the blade, and it slides closer to Eclipsa's left eye. But as the adrenaline starts filling Eclipsa's body, she then pushes the blade back up. Blood began to drip from her hand down the sword and onto her face as she squeezed the blade tighter and tighter. Sinmara smiles, and she uses her ice powers to conjure ice at the tip of the blade, and she forces it into Eclipsa's eye. Eclipsa lets out a blood-curdling scream, and with all of her strength, she then pushes Sinmara away from her. Eclipsa would quickly regain herself, and she would get her feet under her, and she powers up with her saber arm. And she watches Sinmara closely. As she runs around her with tremendous speed, she then swings her saber blade, which cuts Sinmara on her chest. She screams and she dashes at her again, only for her to get cut again by Eclipsa's saber arm. Eclipsa is now leading the fight once again, getting Sinmara cornered, and she does a leg sweep on her, getting her on the ground this time. Sinmara tries to reach for her blade, which was only just about an inch away from her grabbing it, only for Eclipsa to plant her foot on her wrist. She then takes a couple of deep breaths as she starts to feel the agonizing pain of her eye being stabbed out.
So you took my eye, huh? Well then, how about I take something from you, right?
With one swing of her saber arm, she then cuts off Sinmara's dominant arm. Sinmara screams in agony as she wallows on the ground. Eclipsa says,
"See how I could have cut your head off and been done with all of this? Instead, I just want to give you a chance to leave the place. My mother taught me the values of sparing lives, even if they feel like they're too far gone. For you, I think there is a chance, which is why I'm giving you a chance to leave and never come back."
While she was talking, Sinmara crawled on the ground and grabbed her sword. As she was barely able even to stand, she had to use it for support to even walk to the center of the mountain. She turns around to face Eclipsa again and says, "A giantess never gives up her goal, and I am not going anywhere." Raising the blade over her head, she then engulfs it in flames, and she smiled. "I think it's about time to wake him up." She then stabs the sword into the mountain, and suddenly the mountain starts shaking. Only this is when Eclipsa realized that it wasn't a mountain. It was a volcano. And cracks started to form around them. Eclipsa, knowing what's about to happen, makes a run for it. And just when she's about to jump off the side of the volcano, it erupts, with Searcher emerging from it with half of his face disfigured from Shoto's ice attack. His horns were sharp and burned bright with an orangey red hue. Reaching down, he then grabs his mighty sword from the lava and raising it over his head to the sky. He then picks Senmara up and thanks her for her help. And he seeks out Eclipsa for what he had done to her. He looks at Eclipsa, and Eclipsa looks back at him with fear. Taking a deep breath, she says,
Well, this isn't a fair fight. No matter what happens, I can't let him swing that sword. Otherwise, it'll burn the world and my family. Daddy? Skull, give me strength.
Suddenly, she feels the wind blowing around her. She felt their presence, her father and Skull. And it filled her with hope, but more importantly, determination. She smiled, looked up at her giant opponent, and said,
Okay, let's do this.
Searcher, ready to swing his sword down, but then Searcher was then struck with an uppercut. It was Eclipsa. He falls back, nearly landing in the ocean water. And he drops his sword. Senmara screams at him to get back up and berating him in the process. He gets back up and he reaches for his sword that was planted in the ground, only to get struck again and again by this small opponent. Searcher then bashes his fiery fists into the ground, just ranting, "How am I beaten by somebody so small?" Eclipsa says,
Really? That's the problem? Fine, I'll even the playing field.
Raising both of her hands up to the sky, each arm glowed a light of solar and lunar energy. Suddenly, the sun and moon lined up with each other, creating a solar eclipse. And that light engulfed her entire body. She grew in size, almost the same size as Searcher. Her body was like that of her mother and father when they first discovered this ecliptic ability. Not only did her body look astral, but she also went gigantic, as mentioned before. Searcher then flares his nostrils. What is this? Who are you? Eclipsa giggles.
I am the daughter of the One. I am light that shines to show the path of righteousness. I am darkness to shelter the ones who sleep. I am ally to good, nightmare to you. I am Eclipsa, and I will bring back the human race.
Getting into a fighting stance, Searcher then ushers at her and tries to fight, but Eclipsa then dodges with ease. The two would exchange blows to each other, each of them getting a few lucky punches in. But at one point, Searcher then throws a punch that got him the upper hand. But Eclipsa takes a deep breath, and suddenly her body was shrouded in this colorful electricity. And she batters her fist back as a shockwave emitted from her body. Yes, my individuals, this is one for all. Eclipsa would then throw a punch while yelling,
Global Smash!
Hitting Searcher, causing him great pain, and he would toss and turn, unable to stop himself from even reaching the ocean floor. He got wet, and it extinguished some of his flames. Not all of them, but he was still able to fight. She would hit him again and again with One for All, but Searcher would get his distance from her and would launch a fire attack that would shroud her entire body. It was kind of like a Kamehameha. Senmara thinks that they have won, but she then sees her standing in the midst of the fiery glow, slowly walking towards Searcher. He sees this. She is just walking through his attack like it's nothing. Through the flames, Eclipsa then grabs Searcher by his throat, choking him, and he falls to his knees, and Eclipsa would drag him even deeper into the water. But Searcher would then break free and he would run towards his sword. "I've had about enough of this," said Searcher. Eclipsa then sighs from frustration, but she does applaud him for his stubbornness and determination. He charges at her with his sword in hand, and he swings his sword, but just when he's in the middle of swinging it, Eclipsa then grabs it before it could do some destruction, catching it in midair. Searcher, along with Sinmara, have a face of disbelief, their mouths drooped open. With one swing of her hand, she then chops his sword in half, shattering it like glass. Searcher and Sinmara fall to their knees. My sword. But how?
While I held your sword, I absorbed all its energy. Now it's my turn.
Grabbing him by his neck, she then drags him deeper into the ocean floor and submerges him into the water. Searcher didn't even fight back. He knew that without his sword, he could not defeat this one. Therefore, he allowed this to happen, extinguishing his flames forever. Sinmara watches in horror. They just lost. Without Searcher, Ragnarok can no longer go on. Eclipsa then walks back to Sinmara, and she shrinks back down to normal size, putting the sun and moon back into their original positions. Sinmara says, "Wow, you're pretty powerful." "Yeah, I have my mom and dad to thank for that." "Well, it seems that you are victorious. The war of Ragnarok it's come to an end. Let me ask you something, huh? Have you ever fallen in love before? It truly is a wonderful thing."
No, but I have been loved by my family. And that's enough. That's all I need.
You'll find love someday. But for now, could you please reunite me with mine?
Okay.
Reaching for her head, she then strips her of her immortality and takes her out with her own sword. We then transition to the girl with no name, sitting on the porch, worrying about her daughter. It's been hours since she last saw the solar eclipse. Todoroki comforts her, along with Tokoyami and Eri, and Hati, telling her that she'll be fine. I mean, there's no way that she could have lost. I mean, the sun and moon are still there. That gave her some sort of relief, but she's still worried that her daughter is hurt pretty badly. The girl with no name then looks as the sun came over the horizon, and as it came over the horizon, they see a silhouette in the midst of the sunlight. It was Eclipsa, and the girl with no name runs at her with all of the speed that her leg will allow her. She then hugs her so tightly, happy that she's okay, but she looks at her and notices the eye patch over her eye and her broken arm from using One for All. The girl cries for what happened to her daughter. A few days would pass, and Eclipsa would sleep, but one day she woke up feeling refreshed and proud of herself that she saved the world. The girl with no name would greet her daughter good morning and would sit her down to have a talk about something that she wants her to do once she brings back the human race. One day, after the girl would teach her daughter how to open a portal to the abyss, everyone would walk outside, and the Eclipsa would wave her hand around and she would open a portal. And another one, and another one, and another one. Soon, people would start walking from it as the light of the sun blinded them. Everyone was in bewilderment of the world. It was different. The earth seemed clean. There was even more plant life. The skies were clear. It was like the world was resetted. Class 1A would see this older woman that looked like Koe-san and this middle-aged woman that looked like Jigoku, as they remember them as. Uraraka approaches them and says, Koe-san, is that you? I'm sorry to say this, but you look like you're in your 50s. She chuckles, but she nods her head yes. And Jigoku explains that they have been fighting in Ragnarok for over 25 years. And now, the world is safe from the Norse creatures. Wait, Koe-san, some of the Norse gods and Tokoyami are right there. Are we in danger? She shakes her head, no. And that the gods and Tokoyami has actually helped them during the hard times of Ragnarok. They all look at Eclipsa and ask, who is she? And Shoto explains that that's Eclipsa, which is the girl with no name's daughter. She waves her hand at them with a big smile.
Hi, it's nice to finally meet you all. My name's Eclipsa.
Wow, this is so much to take in, said Uraraka. The girl with no name tells Shoto to tell them that she wished that she had more time to tell them everything, but all she could tell them was that the world has been restored, that the animal life has been repopulated, and for them to not mess it up again. This is their second chance to make the earth a better place. The girl, Shoto, Eri, Tokoyami, some of the gods, Hati, and Eclipsa would leave, and they would go to the top of this mountain overlooking everything, seeing the beauty of the green earth as the light of the sun shined over them. The girl with no name clears her throat and says, with a lot of struggle, we did it. We sure did, said Tokoyami. Shoto says, come on, it's about time that we celebrate for saving the world from Ragnarok. A sad face comes across the girl's face, and she says, actually, I won't be joining you guys. Why not? Asked Tokoyami. Eclipsa steps forward with tears flooding her eyes, and she explains that her mother is leaving. What? But why? Said Shoto. Eclipsa explains that her mother says that she wants to find herself, and that she spent so much of her life in the shadows of those who wronged her that she never really thought about what she wanted. So she made the decision to find herself. She's thought about this for a really long time, and, well, she's ready now. Shoto would cry, hugging her, begging her to let her at least come with her. Everyone's journey has someone by their side, right? But the girl would tell her that she's done more for her than she could even count. Even saved her life. But this is something that she needs to do on her own. She would give her final words to Shoto, Tokoyami, even Dark Shadow, Eri, her own daughter, and Hati. Thanking Hati for everything that she has done for her and taught her, and the amazing adventures that they went on together. She even goes on to tell her that she never, even for a millisecond, regretted her decision to save her. The two would hug each other. I hope you find what you're looking for, girl, says Hati. She then turns her attention to her daughter and she hugs her. The girl says, don't worry. I know that when the wind blows, your father is there with me. Eclipsa says,
I love you, Mom.
I love you, my twinkle star. She takes her ring off and she gives it to Eclipsa and tells her that it's her turn to find her true love. Eclipsa, unable to hold her tears, cries a river, but she is comforted by her mother, who says it's time. The girl then climbs down the side of the mountains, and just when she is about to enter the wooden area, she looks back up to her family, waves at them, and then disappears. Eclipse, almost everyone falls to their knees and cries, but Tokoyami is there to comfort them. Even Hati. Eventually, Class 1A reaches them, and they see their tears and understand that something sad must have really happened. And Tokoyami explains what happened to the girl, and, well, the Class 1A gives them sympathy and their condolences. And Eclipsa stares at her mother's ring. She smiled, remembering her mother's last words.
Oh, boys! Or girls. I don't discriminate. So who wants to be my first crush?
And that concludes our story of What If Deku Had a Shadow Wolf. Now, I hope that you all enjoyed this story, and before I end this video, I just wanted to tell y'all real quick, there was actually an alternate ending to this story. I'm going to be doing that a lot on some videos. Anyway, the alternate ending was that when Koi-san had to choose between saving Hati or saving the world, she chose to save the world, regained her powers, and she ended up racing down to the beach, but it was too late, for Fenrir had finished off his own daughter, Hati. He then tried to seek retribution for his fallen daughter by killing Koi-san, but Koi-san finished him off. After mourning the loss of her best friend, Koi-san was then comforted by Tokoyami and the other gods. But something inside of her snapped, and she ended up killing all of them, stealing their power crystals in the process. Koi-san would isolate herself into the abyss, kicking everyone who was in there out, or so she thought, until Eri comforted her. She allowed her to stay for the time being, and Koi-san would give birth to Eclipsa in the abyss, which gave birth to another moon, making 2 moons into the sky, and 1 sun. Jigoku, who actually witnessed Koi-san, Jigoku, who actually witnessed Eri, Koi-san, and Eclipsa exit through the portal and back into the real world. All of them were women at that time, Koi-san being the oldest. Anyway, Koi-san would raise the girls into being anti-heroes, to kill only the wrongdoers and to spare those who actually follow the rules. However, Eclipsa knew that day would be the last time that she would ever see her mother, because she was aware of what she was going to do when she left. And so they embarked on their journey to start a new beginning, and Jigoku would chastise Koi-san for the way that she raised the girls. And she wanted to save them the best way that she can. And then, once Koi-san was alone, she sat down, placed 2 fingers to her head, and vanished, offing herself. Time would pass, and Eclipsa and Eri would do what they were told to do, and they would kill the people who did the wrong and would spare those who did the right. But in the eyes of the law and the government, they needed to be taken care of. But unfortunately, Eclipsa was just too powerful to handle, and Eri was just, well, is Eri. Don't know where I was going with that. Let's just keep going. Anyway, Jigoku tries over and over again to reason with the girls to stop this act, but they just couldn't. It was their life's mission to bring righteousness to the world, and this is the best way they know how. It was the only way they know how. And with that being said, Jigoku decided to bring them peace the best way that she knew how. and she ended up taking out Eerie at one point, but it was completely by accident. Eclipso would hold her sister in her arms as she would let out this deafening scream that made everyone in Japan hear her cry, and with her cry, it would activate that tendril ability that Koei-san used in the USJ, and it would wipe Japan off of the map, off of the face of the earth. However, Eclipsa survives. She was found in the Soviet Union, where the snow was continuously falling down. Looking out to the city, she knew that this world needs better. She knew that this world can be better with her help. Continuing to follow in her mother's footsteps, she began monologuing to herself that she is the only one who is capable of doing so, because she is the daughter of the One, she is the bringer of night and day, but she needs a new name. One that strikes fear into the hearts of many people. She then said, "They can call me All for One." Suddenly, her hair turns white, and then she jumps off of this cliff, leaping into the city as the screen fades to black, and a title card that says "The End." And that was the alternate ending of Shadow Wolf. I'm kind of glad I chose the other one because, as more realistic as the second one may sound, I still love a happy ending now and then. So, anyway, I'm glad that you all followed me to the end of this journey. And, well, what more can I say than #blessed? Good night.